Hi, folks. Hope you're doing all right in this golden age of Democrat brilliance, the era where every bad idea comes pre-wrapped in moral superiority and a blue check. Yes, Democrats are back at it again, folks. This time, Eric Swalwell, the brand new Democrat candidate for governor, has decided elections should basically run like a TikTok poll. He wants us all to be voting by phone so we can max out democracy, which is funny because the only thing he's ever maxed out on is his proximity to Chinese intelligence assets, which is apparently the only level of intelligence that Democrats can have any proximity to, because the same people who think feelings count as policy are over at UKIPA here in California, sending deranged Christmas cards to pro-Trump supporters, asking Santa for the head of a Nazi, promising that Trump will burn in hell, and signing off with a classic holiday message, "You are warned." The FBI needs to step in because this isn't activism, by the way. It's just straight up domestic terrorism dressed up in dollar store glitter.
On the outside, they look like normal Christmas cards. But on the inside, troubling messages.
Wow. What is this?
Several of these cards and notes were left at the doorsteps of homes in a quiet UKIPA neighborhood Monday night,
Unbelievable.
leaving residents on edge.
I pick it up, open it, and it reads, "Santa, I want the head of a Nazi under my tree." And
wow.
then I was like, whoa.
One after another, each card and note carrying violent and threatening messages.
They're trying to cause chaos or something before the holidays and really scare people.
Doorbell camera footage one neighbor shared with us shows a masked man placing one of the notes in front of a door and blowing a kiss. Video from another neighbor shows two masked men, one with longer hair, and this time placing the note in a planter.
It's really terrifying, to be honest with you, because we're home. I have my 14-year-old daughter. What if she would have been outside?
Neighbors now wondering why their homes were targeted, asking, was it political or was it the American flags they have on display?
Maybe it's all the American flags, Trump flags maybe. It feels like, it really does feel like a little bit of a hate crime.
We're investigating to see what that crime could lead to or what was the purpose of those letters. We don't have a specific crime indicated.
And it's obvious, dude.
The San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department says it plans to have more officers patrolling this neighborhood in UKIPA near Wildwood Canyon State Park. In the meantime, neighbors say they're gonna keep putting up their Christmas decorations and won't let the letters diminish their holiday spirit.
Yes, gonna bring the Christmas spirit back to the street, and hopefully that cheers everybody else up.
And Pat Rudabay, another neighbor's camera, caught one of these suspects spitting on a Tesla in the neighborhood. So a lot of video evidence of these two suspects. Neighbors hope they're caught soon. Pat Rudabay.
Democrats are unhinged, folks, but it's no surprise. This is literally what they've turned into, a political culture built on a complete lack of rationality or emotional control of any sort. They're all about attacking, demonizing, and escalating everything into violence, and the more they deny it, the more they enable exactly this kind of behavior from the individuals inside the coalition. They can't just pretend this isn't happening. They have to actively confront it. But instead, they've spent years quietly stoking this sort of behavior. They accuse their right of being the violent ones, while in the meantime, they're literally doing this. Terrorizing a pro-Trump neighborhood in UKIPA with Christmas cards demanding the head of a Nazi, promising Trump will burn in hell, and leaving families, kids included, on edge in their own homes. This should be illegal, folks. I'm pretty sure it is, actually. These people should be arrested. These threats are terroristic in nature. They're meant to intimidate to silence, and it's strategic. It happens all over California, in fact. It happens on college campuses, too. I've been tabling around campuses for the last few weeks, and I can tell you for a fact there's a serious chilling effect here if you're a Republican, a conservative, or even someone who doesn't fit neatly into the Democrat orthodoxy. You don't even have to be on the right. Just being an independent or a moderate puts a target on your back. I've spoken to numerous students at UCLA, and while the campus is not perfectly split 50-50 politically, what is clear is that the conservatives who are there feel completely unable to live in their ideological uniqueness without fearing retaliation. It's clear viewpoint discrimination. They know they could lose their friend groups. They know certain professors will judge or even sideline them, and in multiple cases, academic advisors and faculty have punished or dropped students entirely after discovering they're involved in conservative organizations. This is the tyranny of consensus, folks, and Democrats want this. They want fear because it suppresses dissent, it suppresses open dialogue, and ultimately it suppresses votes. And what we're seeing here in Yucaipa is just another extension of that culture. Enforce conformity through pure intimidation and call it justice. The FBI needs to be involved because this isn't activism, folks. It's domestic terrorism wrapped in Christmas paper. But as is with Democrat tradition, they're never concerned with real-world problems. They're just constantly wringing their hands, trying to present themselves as the greatest victims in the existence of human history. So much so that Jen Psaki recently went on Katie Couric's podcast, and both of them were just talking about how awful it is that Trump gets zero pushback from the media. You know, this coming from the same people who are asking Biden what his favorite flavor of ice cream is. It's just rich.
That I think doesn't, I think you've probably talked about this because you know well, but I don't think that's enough attention, is the way they're reshaping the people in the press briefing room. More and more of the questions in there are by sycophants, are by people who are not asking about news that the American people cares about, but they're asking about, I mean, literally a question has started more than once. Why is Trump in such good shape, right? Or they are, putting out conspiracy theories. They're people who, and they're getting a lot of the questions. There are some of the people who are in the press pools. This means that reporters who are there to cover MBS being at the White House or to cover Zelensky being at the White House or to ask these questions that Mary Bruce fortunately asked yesterday, there are fewer of them. And
that's literally what you do.
You don't know that and see that unless you've lived there, but that's a huge, huge problem because it's becoming more of a Kremlin-esque press corps.
Right, and they've invited a lot of
reporters
from very right-wing media outlets, and you're right, they usually say, I forget, there was one example, like, did you ever believe that you would be the peacemaker? I mean, just
you do the exact same thing. It is actually insane that two of the biggest propagandists in modern American media are here complaining about this specifically. Jen Psaki, who spent years laundering narratives for an administration that coordinated with social media companies to suppress stories, has been more responsible for misleading media framing than almost anyone in recent memory. And yet, here she is, clutching her pearls because a few reporters are supposedly sucking up to Trump. Honestly, why don't you call out your own side before you start calling out the other side? Because, look, I absolutely appreciate trying to hold journalists accountable for lobbing softball questions. I agree, politics shouldn't be an easy job. Presidents should constantly be hit with tough, substantive questions. But how about it starts with you? How about you set the example? How about you hold your side to that same standard? You know, say what you want about Caitlin Collins, but at least the other day she went on with Jasmine Crockett and held her accountable for lying on the House floor about Lee Zeldin and her false insinuations about him receiving donations from a Jeffrey Epstein who wasn't the actual Jeffrey Epstein. That's what it looks like to challenge your own ideological tribe. I want to see more of that from Jen Psaki and Katie Couric before they start lecturing anyone on journalistic integrity. Then maybe they'll actually earn the credibility to make these sorts of criticisms, because right now a propagandist calling out another propagandist is just like the pot calling the kettle Kremlin. Hey, and since we're on that topic, here's an amazing opportunity for something that Jen Psaki and Katie Couric could start calling out. Rhetoric on MSDNC, which is now called MS Now, same propaganda arm of the Democrat Party, though, where apparently a commentator went on and talked about how great it was that people were chasing down ICE agents and attacking them.
So Charlotte's Web is basically ICE, Department of Homeland Security's plan to arrest thousands of supposedly undocumented people in Charlotte. It has terrorized the city. It has shut down traffic. You have schools where 30-40% of the kids are not showing up. And these young people on their own, without politicians, without mom and dad, said, we're standing against this. We want our country to be better. And thousands of them walked out of their schools in protest to say, we don't want ICE here. In addition to the fact, and I won't say that I'm suggesting this behavior, but ICE agents have found that their tires are slashed. They have found that they have been chased out of. Yes, they have been chased out of buildings, chased out of restaurants.
But that's dangerous behavior.
It is dangerous behavior, but it is a demonstration that the American public, when they're not being listened to, these are the options that they'll take. I hope this administration listens and pulls back these ICE raids.
And I hope nothing violent happens to any of these students.
Hold on a second, folks. There's just so much going on here, and none of it is good, to be honest. First off, it is ironic that they're showcasing these student protests, which appear to be a single organized action that, let's be honest, was almost entirely coordinated and encouraged by left-wing activist groups, as always. And even in the footage, you clearly see at least one Mexican flag front and center. Then you have this panelist essentially celebrating criminal behavior, congratulating students for vandalizing federal property because that's what ICE vehicles are, and framing tire slashing and chasing agents out of restaurants as some noble civic form of expression. And the MSDNC host briefly realizes he's crossing a line, nudges him to walk it back, but instead of taking the opportunity to disavow violence outright, or even if they insist on doing the both sides routine, at least acknowledge that the violence is going in one direction towards ICE agents. They only disavow it selectively, and not even toward the people who are being targeted. What kind of upside-down reality are we living in where mainstream commentators frame intimidation of law enforcement as moral courage? This isn't accidental, by the way. It's a byproduct of a political movement that has spent years teaching its supporters that America itself is illegitimate, that borders are immoral, and that any enforcement of immigration law is inherently terrorism. So, of course, they see vandalism, mob pressure, and harassment of federal agents as justified. These people don't care about stability or the rule of law. They don't care about the safety of this country. They've built an ecosystem, media, academia, activist networks, that reward escalation, punishes nuance, and pushes us inch by inch toward civic breakdown. And when you cheer on that trajectory on national television, you're not analyzing the moment. You're helping create the very chaos you pretend to fear. Well, it looks like we're in the retard hour, so might as well take a pit stop by the latest clip of Jasmine Crockett embarrassing herself.
I am still thinking about running. We did get our polling back, so we are moving on to the next phase to determine whether or not this is what makes sense in the moment, and if the infrastructure can be built out in the way that I see it being necessary to actually be able to win, as well as we are continuing to look at the polling on the other side. Listen, they are in a civil war right now on the Republican side as it relates to who will become their nominee. You know, John Cornyn has served the state of Texas for decades at this point in time in some capacity. And right now, you know, I don't know if he's MAGA enough to make it through his primary, but we are evaluating all things and seeing what it would look like to put together a team, and we will make a final decision by Thanksgiving on whether or not we're going to ultimately move forward.
I think the voters of Texas are a whole lot brighter than whatever selective polling Jasmine Crockett and her team are waving around, because Texans are not going to fall for this level of unseriousness or self-promotion masquerading as momentum. Nobody in Texas is clamoring to elevate someone who just in this past week was lying through their teeth on national television, making multiple false accusations, and one of them misrepresenting Lee Zeldin and getting called out so hard that even The View had to tell her essentially, hang on, maybe don't go on TV and fabricate stuff. And that's really the point here, folks. Crockett's entire pitch to CNN hinges on this idea that Republicans are in a civil war, that Cornyn isn't MAGA enough, and that this supposed chaos creates an opening for her. But that framing completely misunderstands Texas politics and reveals more about the Democrat echo chamber than about the state of Texas itself. Texas voters don't reward people who treat public office like a performance slot or who rely on national media bubbles to inflate their relevance. In fact, this moment shows how the Democrats increasingly confuse social media heat and cable news attention with actual electoral viability, and how Democrat institutions have conditioned their own rising stars to believe that outrage moments, viral clips, and manufactured beefs constitute a political base. So what we're seeing with Crockett isn't a serious Senate trial balloon. It's in fact a symptom of a broader culture where celebrity outrage is treated as qualification, while truthfulness, discipline, and competence barely factor into the equation. Now, folks, we all know it wouldn't be Democrat retard hour without a clip from the greatest of them all on their side, AOC.
To be honest, the president's remarks I think, indicate a level of instability. It's not just shocking, it's not just offensive, it's bizarre.
What are you talking about?
It's erratic, it's volatile, and I think it indicates a mental state that we should all be questioning right now, whether that's emotional, mental, what have you. It is not normal to make these accusations. It is not normal.
You've literally done the same thing.
These kinds of threats of violence.
That's literally
and it's also
you.
not normal to also dramatically misquote, as Carolyn Leavitt was doing, what these members of Congress said.
That's rich.
They made a very clear message to U.S. service members, which is that you do not have to obey an illegal order. And I think that's an important message to reiterate, because this administration seems to be increasingly trying to go down that path.
It's actually insane that AOC is sitting here trying to pathologize the president's mental state while her own party engages in far worse behavior every single week. We literally just watched Jasmine Crockett do this exact thing, weaponizing pop psychology, assigning instability to her opponents, and using that as a substitute for evidence or argument. This is the pattern, folks. Democrats frame any Republican rhetoric as erratic or dangerous, even when they themselves routinely make exaggerated claims, escalate rhetoric, and flirt with outright calls for resistance that blur into threats, as we saw at the beginning of this video. And AOC, of all people, pretending to be the arbiter of normal political behavior is almost comical given her own history of wildly inflammatory statements, from implying that America runs concentration camps to suggesting that dissent from her worldview is inherently violent. But beneath the hypocrisy is something deeper, a cultural reflex on the left to medicalize political disagreement. Instead of debating ideas, they default to diagnosing opponents as unstable, unfit, or dangerous. And that serves as strategic purpose for some reason. It delegitimizes dissent. It narrows the boundaries of acceptable discourse, and it reinforces a political ecosystem, media, academia, activist groups that treats conservative viewpoints as psychological defects rather than ideological positions. And so what AOC is doing here isn't just projection, it's a window into how the modern Democrat movement maintains cultural control by turning politics into pathology and turning disagreement into evidence of some sort of illness. And since that's what Democrats love to do, why not just take a page out of their playbook and go along and see what latest inflammatory insaneness Zohar Mamdani is doing himself.
Press conference with President Trump, a reporter asked you whether you believe that President Trump is in fact a fascist, a word that you've used in the past. You were about to answer, then President Trump sort of jumped in and he said, quote, "That's okay, you can just say yes. It's easier than explaining it." So, Mr. Mayor-elect, just to be very clear, do you think that President Trump is a fascist?
And after President Trump said that, I said yes. And
so you do.
And that's something that I've said in the past. I say it today. And I think what I appreciated about the conversation that I had with the president was that we were not shy about the places of disagreement, about the politics that has brought us to this moment. And we also wanted to focus on what it could look like to deliver on a shared analysis of an affordability crisis for New Yorkers.
This is a completely inaccurate retelling of what actually happened, and it's wild because the entire exchange is on video. Mamdani literally froze. He never answered in the moment, never called Trump a fascist to his face. But apparently, only after the cameras were safely pointed elsewhere did he suddenly develop retroactive courage and claim he said something he simply did not say.
To Stephen Nelson, he asked about your comment calling the president a fascist, and your answer was, both President Trump and I have been clear about our positions and our views. Are you affirming that you think President Trump is a fascist?
I've spoken about...
That's okay, you can just say yes. Okay. It's easier. It's easier than explaining it. I don't mind.
Mr. President, I wanted to ask you...
Again, it's right there on video. None of what Mamdani described happened the way he's describing it. And the fact that he's now fabricating his own bravery after the fact tells you everything about this new political culture Democrats have cultivated. They've built an entire environment where you get rewarded not for honesty or clarity, but for delivering the right performative soundbite after the moment of accountability is passed. This is the same pattern you see across left-wing media and activist spaces. Inflate your rhetoric to 11, label your opponents fascist, but only when you're at a safe distance and surrounded by ideological allies. It's the politics of projection, folks. Manufacture moral superiority, rewrite the footage if necessary, and hope the press won't challenge you. And what it reveals about today's moment is that the Democrats' grip over public discourse is weakening. They're used to defining the narrative without pushback, but now, with more unfiltered footage, direct encounters, and alternative media, these contradictions are becoming harder to hide. Mamdani's revisionism isn't just about one exchange. It's a symptom of a political movement that has grown reliant on scripted outrage and after-the-fact spin. Not real, leadership.
You've also said in the past that President Trump has engaged in a, quote, attack on our democracy. You've called him a despot. Do you still believe President Trump is a threat to the democracy?
Everything that I've said in the past, I continue to believe. And that's the thing that I think is important in our politics, is that we don't shy away from where we have disagreements, but we understand what it is that brings us to that table. Because I'm not coming into the Oval Office to make a point or make a stand. I'm coming in there to deliver for New Yorkers. And a few weeks ago,
Not like that,
I was asked by a
apparently.
reporter 3 words to describe myself. I said New York City. And that's what animated that conversation. How do we deliver for the people of New York City?
It is actually shameless. The level to which this man feels comfortable lying and the ease with which he rewrites his own record should genuinely concern every New Yorker. How does someone this willing to distort reality slip through the cracks of public accountability? Well, watching with Mamdani is a culmination of a political environment that rewards performative language, calling Trump a despot, a threat to democracy, an existential danger, but only when the speaker is protected by ideological allies and the moment carries no personal risk. He refuses to say any of this when facing Trump directly, but then turns around and insists he stands by everything he's ever said. That is encouraged, folks, is the illusion of conviction crafted after the fact, and it reveals a deeper cultural shift. Certain segments of the Democrat Party have grown so accustomed to friendly media, insulated campuses, and activist validation that they no longer distinguish between rhetoric meant to impress their own echo chamber and statements that actually reflect reality. This constant inflation of language, everyone they dislike as a fascist, a despot, a threat to democracy, has cheapened the very concepts they claim to defend and eroded trust in the institutions they inhabit. New Yorkers deserve better than officials who treat politics like a performance art piece, where sincerity is optional and truth is whatever helps their narrative. And by the way, they're not just looking for truth that helps their narrative, they're looking for ways to help themselves win elections, and that includes this recent suggestion from California gubernatorial candidate and Democrat Eric Swalwell, who recently suggested that we just get rid of mail-in ballots and paper ballots and just redo our entire electoral process in a way that would certainly not benefit Democrats in a one-sided manner, because as we all know, they love fairness, as we've seen in this great state of California.
I want us to be able to vote by phone. I think every Californian vote by phone. Yeah, if we can do our taxes, do our, make our healthcare appointments, make essentially do your banking online, you should be able to vote by phone. Make it safe, make it secure, but it's actually already happening all over the United States. I want us to be a blue state that doesn't do just a little bit better than like Georgia or Alabama when it comes to like voting access. I want us to max out democracy. Also, as it relates to democracy, if you wait in line for 30 minutes or more, if you do want to vote in person, I think you should fine every county for every minute that a person has to wait longer. We have to be better, not just a little bit better than the other states. The DMV. I don't think Californians should have to go in person to the DMV anymore. I think we can do that virtually. I think you can have the DMV employees do it virtually, but that's a lot of real estate.
Is that the most popular position?
Digitize the DMV. Digitize the DMV.
Today, yeah.
We can modernize the state, and I look forward to bringing these ideas to Californians.
Of course, one of the main proposals from a Democrat gubernatorial candidate is a plan that would make elections easier for Democrats to manipulate, because that's the trajectory the party has been on for years, decades at this point. They are obsessed with weakening every guardrail that ensures transparency, chain of custody, verification, auditability, all of it. And Swalwell's pitch for voting by phone fits perfectly into that worldview, because it creates a system with no paper trail, no meaningful oversight, and no way for voters to confirm how or even if their vote was counted. It turns the most sacred civic act into a swipe and forget interaction that disappears into the same ecosystem already compromised by foreign data harvesting, security breaches, and algorithmic manipulation. And by the way, Swalwell is suggesting this while California is in absolute crisis. Homes are burning down across the state. Taxes are suffocating small businesses. The state has 8 of the 10 dirtiest cities in America. Homelessness is spiraling out of control. Violent crime is rising. And California, despite spending among the highest per student in the country, continues to deliver some of the weakest educational outcomes in history. Yes, Swalwell's grand vision for maxing out democracy is digitizing the DMV and letting people cast ballots between TikTok scrolls. It's a case study in how disconnected the Democrat political class has become from the lived reality of the people they claim to serve. Instead of addressing the structural problems that make California increasingly unlivable, they chase flashy tech gimmicks and voting schemes that conveniently consolidate their own power. This isn't modernization, by the way, folks. It's misdirection, and it reveals a political movement more focused on engineering outcomes and governing a state that is collapsing under their watch. Democrats think so little of you, folks, that they don't even bother pretending to run on policies that would improve your life. They just walk out there, say whatever sounds good in the moment in their head, and trust that decades of one-party dominance will carry them through into winning. That isn't ignorance, by the way. It's pure arrogance. They know they can offer you nothing and still expect you to vote for them. And their confidence in that should absolutely enrage you. This is what happens when a political machine faces no competition, no accountability, no pressure to deliver actual results. It becomes lazy, brazen, and contemptuous of the very people it claims to represent. So the real question becomes, how long will you tolerate a system that treats you like an afterthought? How long will you accept leaders who give you slogans instead of solutions, gimmicks instead of governance? Look, maybe you're not ready to vote Republican. Maybe you're not even ready to vote independent. Fine. Okay, but at minimum, stop rewarding behavior that actively drags this state backward. Skip a race. Maybe vote third party. Break the cycle. Because if you keep voting for people who refuse to take your problems seriously, you're not just enabling the decline of our state, you're becoming part of the machinery that makes it possible. And ask yourself, what kind of California do you want to live in 10 years from now? One where both parties are forced to compete and deliver? One where a ruling class coasts on your complacency while the state around you collapses? While your friends and family move out of state because it's unlivable here. Only you can decide whether this moment becomes a turning point or just another chapter in a long, slow slide into Venezuelan-style authoritarian decline. You tell me what you think in the comments down below. Hope you have a terrific day. Peace.